It was a moment that would change everything. When the wealthy businessman decided to mock the elderly janitor, quietly cleaning the marble floors of the Grand Palace Hotel, he had no idea who was watching from across the lobby. Let us know where you're watching from today, as we share a story about appearances, respect, and an unexpected encounter that left everyone speechless. Where are you watching from today? Comment down below. The Grand Palace Hotel stood as a monument to luxury in the heart of the city, its 5-star rating earned through decades of catering to the world's elite. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings higher than most homes, reflecting light across polished marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. This was a place where wealth wasn't just displayed, it was expected. Among the sea of tailored suits and designer dresses moved Samuel, a janitor in his 70s, his weathered hands quietly guiding a mop across the expansive lobby. He worked with a methodical precision born from years of perfecting his craft, his movements almost invisible to the guests, who rarely spared him a glance. His uniform was clean but well worn, his shoes practical rather than fashionable, and his gray hair neatly combed underneath his service cap. The morning had begun like any other for Samuel. He had arrived at 5 a.m., prepared his cleaning cart, and started his rounds through the hotel's public spaces before most guests had stirred from their slumber. By mid-morning, the lobby had filled with the usual crowd, business executives checking emails on leather couches, tourists planning their day's adventures, and the occasional celebrity hidden behind designer sunglasses. What made this day different was the arrival of Maxwell Richardson, CEO of Richardson Enterprises, and a man accustomed to commanding attention. His expensive watch caught the light as he strode across the lobby, his Italian leather shoes clicking authoritatively against the floor Samuel had just finished cleaning. Behind him trailed 2 assistants, both struggling to keep pace while balancing coffee and tablets. Maxwell had built his empire through ruthless business tactics and an unwavering belief in social hierarchy. To him, the world was divided into 2 categories, those who served and those who were served. He had long ago decided which category he belonged to. As Samuel carefully moved his mop around the edge of an ornate column, Maxwell's path intersected with the janitor's work area. The businessman paused, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to disdain as he observed the elderly man's careful work. "Excuse me," Samuel said softly, gesturing to the wet floor sign he had placed nearby. "Just finishing up here, sir." Something about the janitor's dignified tone seemed to irk Maxwell. Perhaps it was the lack of deference he felt entitled to, or maybe it was simply that he disliked being made to wait by someone he considered beneath him. Whatever the reason, the businessman's lips curled into a smirk. "At your age, I'd have thought you'd have found something better to do with your life than pushing a mop," Maxwell remarked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. His assistants exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent. Samuel paused, his hands stilling on the mop handle. There was no anger in his eyes, just a quiet dignity that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Every job has its purpose, sir," he replied evenly. Maxwell laughed, a sharp sound devoid of genuine humor. "Some purposes are clearly more valuable than others," he said, gesturing to his custom suit. "This outfit costs more than you probably make in 3 months. That should tell you something about the value society places on different kinds of work." Across the lobby, seated in a discreet corner partially hidden by a large potted palm, a man lowered his book. His beard was slightly unkempt, his hair pushed back from his forehead, and his clothing simple but well made. Most guests were too preoccupied with their own importance to notice him, which was precisely how he preferred it. But now, his dark eyes focused intently on the scene unfolding between the businessman and the janitor. Samuel had resumed his work, his movements unhurried despite the businessman's mockery. "Value comes in many forms, sir," he responded, his voice remaining respectful despite the disrespect being shown to him. "Philosophy from the cleaning staff," Maxwell scoffed, turning to his assistants who offered weak smiles in response. "Next, he'll be giving us investment advice. Tell me, old man, if you're so wise, why are you spending your golden years scrubbing floors for people like me?" The question hung in the air, laden with assumptions about success, worth, and dignity. Several nearby guests had begun to take notice of the exchange, some showing discomfort at Maxwell's behavior, while others seemed mildly entertained by the spectacle. Samuel straightened his back, years of physical labor evident in the slight stiffness of his movements. "I clean because it brings order to chaos," he said simply, "and because an honest day's work is nothing to be ashamed of, regardless of what that work might be." Maxwell's face flushed slightly at the implication that his own work might be less than honest. "Spare me the working-class hero speech," he snapped. "The fact remains that some of us make decisions while others clean up after them. That's just the natural order of things." The man in the corner had set his book aside entirely now, his attention fully captured by the escalating tension. There was something in his expression, not anger, but rather a thoughtful assessment, as if he were weighing his options. "Perhaps you're right, sir," Samuel conceded, though his eyes reflected no agreement. "Though I've found that how a person treats those who can do nothing for them says more about their character than any business success." This philosophical response seemed to further irritate Maxwell, who was unaccustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he deemed insignificant. "Character doesn't buy vacation homes or private jets," he retorted. "I don't need life lessons from someone who couldn't even climb the ladder to management in a service job." Samuel's weathered face revealed nothing as he absorbed the insult. He simply nodded and continued with his work, his dignity intact despite the businessman's attempts to diminish him. Maxwell, however, seemed determined to prove his superiority. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" he asked, stepping deliberately onto the freshly mopped floor, leaving a trail of footprints. "I understand my worth. People like you are interchangeable, replaceable parts in a machine that serves people like me." The watching man in the corner stood up now, his movement drawing little attention as all eyes remained fixed on the confrontation in the center of the lobby. He moved with a deliberate calm, his steps unhurried yet purposeful as he approached the scene. Samuel had begun to clean up the new marks on his freshly mopped floor without complaint, his face betraying only the slightest hint of resignation. Years of experience had taught him that some battles weren't worth fighting, and that true dignity came from within, rather than from the approval of others. Maxwell, interpreting Samuel's silence as submission, pressed his advantage. "See, you don't even defend yourself because you know I'm right. Some people are meant to lead, and others are meant to—" His words died in his throat as a hand came to rest gently on Samuel's shoulder. Maxwell looked up, the cutting remark forgotten as he registered the presence of the man who had been watching from across the lobby. Several guests gasped in recognition, phones discreetly raised to capture the moment. The hotel staff exchanged knowing glances, having been trained to respect this particular guest's privacy above all others. The air in the lobby seemed to still, the background noise of conversation faltering, as attention shifted to the three men, now standing in a tableau of contrasting fortunes. The moment hung suspended between what had been said and what would happen next, a perfect illustration of how quickly the tables can turn when we least expect it. And as the wealthy businessman began to recognize exactly who had witnessed his mockery of the elderly janitor, his face transformed from arrogant confidence to dawning horror. The consequences of his actions were about to become painfully clear, though in a way none of the onlookers could have anticipated. The hand resting on Samuel's shoulder belonged to none other than Keanu Reeves, his presence in the hotel now causing ripples of excitement throughout the lobby. He wasn't dressed in the typical Hollywood fashion, no designer labels or ostentatious accessories, just a simple black t-shirt, well-worn jeans, and a jacket that spoke of comfort rather than status. Despite his understated appearance, there was no mistaking his identity. His signature beard and gentle eyes were unmistakable, carrying the quiet charisma that had endeared him to millions worldwide. The Grand Palace Hotel had long been Keanu's preferred accommodation whenever he visited the city. Unlike other celebrities who demanded special treatment, Keanu was known among the staff for his humility. He remembered names, asked about families, and most importantly, treated everyone, from the general manager to the housekeeping staff, with the same genuine respect. Maxwell Richardson stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape as recognition dawned. This wasn't just any celebrity witness to his behavior. This was Keanu Reeves, a man whose reputation for kindness and decency had become nearly as legendary as his film career. To be caught in an act of cruelty by someone so universally respected for the opposite was perhaps the worst possible scenario. "Good morning, Samuel," Keanu said warmly, his voice carrying easily in the now hushed lobby. "How's Martha doing? Did she recover well from her surgery?" Samuel's weathered face broke into a gentle smile. "She's much better, Mr. Reeves, thank you for asking. The flowers you sent brightened her hospital room considerably." Keanu nodded, clearly pleased by the news. "I'm glad to hear it. Your granddaughter still planning to study film?" "Yes, sir. Your encouragement meant the world to her. She's applying to film school next fall." Their exchange revealed a depth of familiarity that caught everyone by surprise, none more so than Maxwell, whose complexion had paled considerably. It was becoming painfully evident that the man he had been belittling was not just known to Keanu Reeves, but was someone the actor genuinely cared about. Keanu's eyes shifted to Maxwell, taking in the expensive suit, the designer watch, the carefully cultivated appearance of success. There was no anger in his gaze, no judgment, just a calm assessment that somehow felt more powerful than any outburst could have been. "I don't believe we've met," Keanu said, extending his hand toward Maxwell. "Keanu Reeves." Maxwell rushed to shake the offered hand, his previous arrogance replaced by an almost desperate eagerness to make a good impression. "Maxwell Richardson, CEO of Richardson Enterprises. It's an honor, Mr. Reeves. I'm a huge fan of your work." "Thank you," Keanu replied simply, his tone polite but noticeably cooler than when he had spoken to Samuel. He turned back to the janitor with genuine interest. "Samuel, I was hoping to catch you this morning. I wanted to thank you personally." Maxwell and his assistants exchanged confused glances as Samuel nodded knowingly. "No thanks necessary, Mr. Reeves, just doing my job." Keanu shook his head. "That's where I have to disagree. Finding my mother's lost wedding ring after the charity gala last month was far beyond your job description, especially considering you stayed 3 hours after your shift ended to help search for it." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. The hotel staff nodded in confirmation. They had all heard the story of Samuel's dedication that night. "It was important," Samuel said simply. "I know what it means to have something irreplaceable." Keanu smiled. "My mother was in tears when I returned it to her. She wanted me to give you this." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small envelope. "It's not much, but it comes with her deepest gratitude." Samuel accepted the envelope with a gracious nod. "Please tell her it was my privilege." Throughout this exchange, Maxwell stood awkwardly to the side. His previous importance diminished as he witnessed a genuine connection between two people from worlds that, according to his worldview, should never have intersected as equals. Keanu turned his attention back to Maxwell, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Richardson, I couldn't help overhearing your conversation earlier." Maxwell's face flushed with embarrassment. "Mr. Reeves, I can explain." "You mentioned value," Keanu interrupted gently. "It's an interesting concept, isn't it? How we measure the worth of a person." The lobby had grown so quiet that the distant ding of the elevator was audible. Hotel guests and staff alike were transfixed by the unfolding scene, many discreetly recording the encounter on their phones. "I've been fortunate in my career," Keanu continued, "but I've learned that true value isn't found in what you own or what title you hold. It's found in how you treat others, especially those you believe can do nothing for you." His words echoed Samuel's earlier sentiment so closely that several observers exchanged meaningful glances. Maxwell swallowed hard, recognizing his own words being gently but firmly challenged. "Samuel here has worked at the Grand Palace for over 30 years, Keanu said, his admiration evident. "He's raised 3 children, put them all through college, and now helps with his grandchildren. He volunteers at the Veterans Hospital every weekend, and when a guest loses something important, he stays late without complaint to help find it." Maxwell's assistants had backed away slightly, creating distance between themselves and their increasingly uncomfortable boss. "I've learned more about dignity and integrity from Samuel than from many of the executives and celebrities I've met," Keanu added, "and I've found that those who understand the value of all work, not just the kind that comes with corner offices, tend to be more successful in ways that actually matter." The wealthy businessman shifted his weight from one expensive shoe to the other, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. The public nature of his humiliation was compounded by the realization that videos of this encounter would likely be circulating on social media within minutes. "I didn't mean to offend," Maxwell mumbled, his voice barely audible. Keanu nodded, neither accepting nor rejecting the weak apology. "I'm sure Samuel would appreciate if you respected the wet floor signs next time," he said, gesturing to the footprints Maxwell had deliberately left on the freshly mopped floor. The businessman looked down at the evidence of his petty display of power, then back up at the janitor, whose dignity now stood in stark contrast to his own diminished stature. "Of course," Maxwell said quickly. "I apologize, Samuel. That was inconsiderate of me." Samuel nodded, accepting the apology with the same quiet grace he had shown when receiving the insults. "No harm done, sir. The floor will dry." There was wisdom in his response that went beyond the literal meaning, a reminder that some transgressions, while revealing of character, need not leave permanent marks. Keanu checked his watch. "Samuel, I believe your break starts soon. Would you mind if I joined you? I'd love to hear how your grandson's baseball season is going." "It would be my pleasure, Mr. Reeves." As the actor and the janitor walked toward the employee break room, side by side in comfortable familiarity, Maxwell Richardson stood alone in the lobby, surrounded by onlookers, whose expressions ranged from secondhand embarrassment to barely concealed satisfaction at witnessing justice so elegantly served. The contrast could not have been more pronounced: a wealthy man rendered small by his own arrogance, and a janitor whose dignity had revealed a wealth of character that no money could buy. The lesson hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable, as the lobby slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though nothing would quite be the same for those who had witnessed this unexpected encounter. As Keanu and Samuel disappeared through the staff door, Maxwell Richardson remained rooted to the spot, the weight of his public humiliation pressing down on him. The lobby had begun to return to its normal bustle, but he could feel the sideways glances and hushed conversations that were undoubtedly about him. His two assistants stood awkwardly nearby, uncertain whether to offer comfort or maintain their distance from the toxic fallout of their boss's behavior. "Sir," one of them finally ventured, "we have that meeting across town in 40 minutes. Maxwell nodded stiffly, grateful for the excuse to exit the scene of his embarrassment. As he strode toward the hotel entrance, his earlier swagger notably diminished. He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something fundamental had shifted in his carefully constructed world. Behind the scenes, in the staff break room, a very different atmosphere prevailed. The simple space, with its utilitarian furniture and vending machines, had become momentarily transformed by Keanu's presence. Yet the actor sat comfortably at the laminate table, completely at ease as Samuel unwrapped his homemade sandwich. "She's getting so tall," Keanu remarked, smiling at the photo on Samuel's phone of a young girl in a baseball uniform. "Looks like she's got a good stance at the plate, too." Samuel beamed with grandfatherly pride. "Takes after her mother. Got a better arm than most boys on the team, though some of them don't like admitting it." Their conversation flowed naturally, unmarked by the status disparity that would have seemed obvious to someone like Maxwell. Other hotel staff members entered the break room, some doing double takes at the sight of the famous actor, but Keanu greeted each with the same warmth he showed Samuel. Meanwhile, as Maxwell settled into the back seat of his luxury car, he pulled out his phone and did what had become instinctive whenever he encountered a name of importance. He searched for information. "Samuel Wilson Janitor, Grand Palace Hotel," he typed, expecting to find nothing significant. To his surprise, several results appeared. A local newspaper article from 3 years ago showed a photo of Samuel receiving a community service award for his 30 years of volunteer work with veterans. Another link led to a fundraising page where Samuel had raised over $50,000 for children's cancer research by participating in a charity walk every year for the past decade. There was even a short interview in a hospitality industry publication about his half-century of service in the hotel industry. Maxwell scrolled through the results with increasing discomfort. The replaceable janitor he had mocked had built a life of quiet significance that had touched countless lives. By contrast, Maxwell's own search results were dominated by business acquisitions, property purchases, and the occasional society page mention of lavish parties. Back at the hotel, Keanu and Samuel's break was drawing to a close. As they stood, Keanu placed a hand on the older man's shoulder. "Samuel, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about," he said, his tone turning slightly more serious. "That script you showed me last time I was here, your grandson's screenplay." Samuel's eyes widened slightly. "You actually read it?" "Jason was over the moon just knowing I'd passed it along, but we never expected you'd have the time." Keanu nodded. "Not only did I read it, but I showed it to a producer friend of mine. He thinks it has real potential." The janitor's weathered hands trembled slightly as he absorbed this news. "Mr. Reeves, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me help Jason develop it further," Keanu replied. "There's a program for young screenwriters that my production company sponsors. The application deadline is next week, but I'd like to recommend him personally." Tears welled in Samuel's eyes. "His parents and we've tried to support his dream, but the practical realities—" "Talent deserves opportunity," Keanu said simply. "And from what I read, your grandson has talent in abundance." Across town, Maxwell's car pulled up outside a gleaming office building where his meeting awaited. But instead of immediately exiting the vehicle, he remained seated, still scrolling through the digital footprint of the man he had so casually dismissed. A video clip from the local news caught his attention, Samuel being interviewed after organizing a coat drive for homeless veterans. "I just believe we all have a responsibility to each other," Samuel's voice came through the phone's speaker. "Success isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give back. My father taught me that, and I've tried to teach it to my children and grandchildren." Maxwell clicked the phone off, a strange tightness in his chest. Throughout his career, he had measured worth through tangible metrics, net worth, property holdings, the ability to influence markets with a single decision. Never had he considered that a man who cleaned floors for a living might possess a kind of wealth he himself had never attained. Back at the Grand Palace, news of Keanu's presence had spread throughout the hotel. As the actor walked with Samuel back to the lobby, where the janitor would resume his duties, staff members and guests alike watched with interest. Hotel management, recognizing the unique public relations opportunity, had hurriedly assembled in the lobby to greet the celebrity guest properly. "Mr. Reeves," the hotel manager gushed, stepping forward with an extended hand. "We're so honored to have you staying with us again. If there's anything at all we can do to make your stay more comfortable—" "Thank you," Keanu replied with a polite smile. "Samuel has been taking excellent care of me, as always." The manager blinked, momentarily thrown by the implication that a janitor had somehow been responsible for the care of their VIP guest. "Of course, Samuel is one of our most valued team members." He recovered quickly, though his tone suggested this was a newly discovered fact. Keanu's subtle emphasis on Samuel's role had not gone unnoticed by the staff gathered nearby. Several exchanged meaningful glances, recognizing that the dynamics of their workplace hierarchy had been quietly challenged. By the time Maxwell returned to the hotel later that afternoon, the story of the morning's encounter had thoroughly circulated not only among the hotel staff, but across social media. As he approached the reception desk, he noticed how the staff's demeanor toward him had cooled considerably. There were no eager smiles or offers of assistance, just professional courtesy that lacked the deference he had come to expect. "Mr. Richardson," the front desk manager acknowledged him with a curt nod. "How may I help you?" Maxwell cleared his throat. "I was hoping to speak with Samuel, the janitor I encountered this morning." The manager's expression remained carefully neutral. "Samuel's shift ends at 4. He should be in the East Wing at this time." With a nod of thanks, Maxwell made his way through the hotel's opulent corridors, rehearsing an apology in his mind. He found Samuel methodically cleaning the ornate mirrors that lined a hallway leading to the hotel's ballrooms. The janitor worked with a craftsman's attention to detail, ensuring each surface was spotless before moving to the next. For a moment, Maxwell simply watched, seeing for the first time the dignity in the older man's labor. There was pride in Samuel's movements, a quiet professionalism that had nothing to do with salary or status. "Excuse me, Samuel," Maxwell finally said, his voice lacking its earlier condescension. Samuel turned, recognition dawning in his eyes as he saw the businessman who had mocked him hours earlier. But there was no resentment in his expression, no triumph at the knowledge that the tables had turned. There was only the same patient dignity he had displayed throughout their previous encounter. "Yes, Mr. Richardson," he replied, setting down his cleaning cloth. Maxwell took a deep breath, finding himself unexpectedly nervous. In boardrooms and business negotiations, he wielded words like weapons. But here, facing a man he had wronged, the right words seemed elusive. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "A real one, not the half-hearted excuse I offered earlier. The way I spoke to you was inexcusable." Samuel regarded him thoughtfully, the wisdom of his years evident in his gaze. The moment stretched between them, laden with the potential for either redemption or rejection. Samuel's weathered face softened as he studied the businessman before him. The arrogance that had defined Maxwell earlier had been replaced by something rarely seen in men of his position: genuine humility. "I appreciate that, Mr. Richardson," Samuel said finally. "Apology accepted." Maxwell had expected more resistance, perhaps even righteous anger. The janitor's simple acceptance left him momentarily at a loss for words. "Just like that?" he asked. A slight smile crossed Samuel's face. "Holding grudges is heavy work, Mr. Richardson. At my age, I've learned to travel light." There was a wisdom in the statement that resonated with Maxwell in ways he hadn't anticipated. Throughout his career, he had meticulously cataloged every slight, using them as fuel for his ambition. The thought of simply letting go had never occurred to him. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Maxwell continued, "about bringing order to chaos, about the value of work." He gestured to the immaculate mirrors lining the hallway. "I don't think I ever really saw the results of what people like you do. It was just expected." Samuel nodded. "Most don't notice good work until it's not being done anymore. That's true whether you're cleaning mirrors or running companies." "Mr. Reeves obviously sees it," Maxwell observed. "He knows your family, your grandchildren. I've had the same executive assistant for 8 years, and I couldn't tell you if she has children." The janitor resumed his methodical cleaning of the mirrors as they talked. "Mr. Reeves sees people, not positions," he said simply. "First time he stayed here, about 12 years ago, he helped me move furniture when we were short-staffed during a convention. No cameras, no publicity. He just rolled up his sleeves and asked how he could help." Maxwell tried to imagine any of his wealthy peers doing the same, and found he couldn't. "That day, with his mother's ring, you said you stayed 3 hours after your shift." "4, actually," Samuel corrected. "It was a small thing, thin gold band with tiny diamonds. Fell off during the charity gala. We turned that ballroom upside down looking for it." "But why?" Maxwell pressed. "It wasn't your responsibility. You weren't being paid overtime." Samuel paused, his cloth hovering over the glass. "Mr. Richardson, have you ever lost something that money couldn't replace?" The question struck Maxwell with unexpected force. His mind went immediately to his father's watch, a simple timepiece that had stopped working years ago, but still occupied a place of honor in his desk drawer. Despite its modest value, he'd never consider parting with it. "Yes," he admitted, "I suppose I have." "Then you understand," Samuel said, resuming his work. "That ring belonged to Mr. Reeves's mother before she passed. When I heard him explaining its importance to the event staff, I knew I couldn't leave until we found it." Maxwell nodded slowly, a new perspective taking shape in his mind. "And you found it?" "Under a serving table, caught in a crack in the floorboards," Samuel confirmed with a hint of pride. "Smallest things can be the most important." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Keanu, who rounded the corner with the hotel manager at his side. Upon seeing Maxwell, the actor paused, his expression curious, but not unfriendly. "Samuel," Keanu called, "am I interrupting?" "Not at all, Mr. Reeves," the janitor replied. "Mr. Richardson and I were just having a conversation." Keanu approached, his gaze moving between the two men. "Everything all right?" Maxwell stepped forward, extending his hand to Keanu. "Mr. Reeves, I want to apologize for the display you witnessed this morning. It was beneath me, and more importantly, it was unfair to Samuel." Keanu accepted the handshake, his grip firm but not challenging. Apologies are always best directed to the person who was wronged, he observed, glancing towards Samuel. We've made our peace, Samuel assured him. A thoughtful expression crossed Keanu's face. That's good to hear. He turned to Maxwell. It takes courage to admit when we've been wrong. The businessman felt a weight lifting that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. It's been educational, he admitted. Samuel has given me a lot to think about. Keanu smiled. He tends to have that effect on people. That's why I make a point of staying at this hotel whenever I'm in town. He placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. Some of the best conversations of my life have happened right here in these hallways. The hotel manager, who had been hovering nearby, seemed both confused and intrigued by the unlikely trio before him. The janitor, the movie star, and the business tycoon, an improbable gathering that defied the usual social hierarchies of the luxury establishment. Samuel, Maxwell said suddenly, I understand your granddaughter is interested in film school. The janitor nodded, a hint of pride lighting his eyes. Yes, sir, Alicia. She's applying for scholarships now. Maxwell reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, offering it to Samuel. Richardson Enterprises has an educational foundation. We offer several scholarships each year, particularly focused on the arts. I'd like her to apply. Samuel accepted the card with measured gratitude. That's very kind, Mr. Richardson. It's not charity, Maxwell clarified. From what Mr. Reeves mentioned earlier, she sounds talented. Our foundation looks for promising students who might otherwise face financial barriers. Keanu watched this exchange with quiet approval, the subtle nod he offered, suggesting that perhaps this was the outcome he had hoped for all along. As the afternoon light streamed through the hotel's massive windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors, an unexpected moment of connection had bridged three vastly different lives. Keanu, who had witnessed the initial conflict, now witnessed its resolution, a resolution that spoke to the possibility of growth and change, even in unlikely circumstances. Later that evening, as the Grand Palace Hotel prepared for its nightly influx of dinner guests and late arrivals, Samuel completed his shift. As he changed out of his uniform in the staff locker room, he found an envelope that had been slipped through the vent of his locker. Inside was a handwritten note from Maxwell Richardson, along with information about his company's educational foundation. Samuel, the note read, Our conversation today changed something in me. For years, I've measured success by what I've acquired. Today, I was reminded that true legacy is measured by what we give. Thank you for that reminder. I'd be honored to help your granddaughter pursue her dreams and to learn more about your grandson's screenplay as well. Sometimes, the most valuable lessons come from unexpected teachers. As Samuel made his way through the employee exit, he passed the hotel's grand entrance where valets were assisting guests from luxury vehicles. Among them was Keanu, quietly sliding into a modest car without fanfare or attention. Their eyes met briefly, an understanding passing between them that required no words. And somewhere across town, Maxwell Richardson sat in his penthouse office, the cityscape glittering beyond his windows. On his desk lay a newly framed photograph of his father, something that had remained tucked away in a drawer for years. Beside it was a list of his employee names, each followed by blank spaces waiting to be filled with details of their lives, their families, their dreams. The Grand Palace Hotel had witnessed an unexpected moment of transformation that day, not through grand gestures or public declarations, but through the simple power of dignity, recognized and respect earned. In a world increasingly divided by status and wealth, three men had discovered that true value transcends job titles and bank accounts. It resides in the connections we forge, the respect we extend, and the humanity we recognize in one another. And as videos of the encounter spread across social media in the days that followed, they carried with them a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound lessons come when we least expect them, from teachers we might easily overlook.